Chapter 1, The Map and the Legend. Once upon a time, on a stormy night, a group of young adventurers had a sight. They found a map that was old and worn, with a legend of treasure, tattered and torn. The map showed an island, surrounded by seas, where Blackbeard's treasure was buried with ease. The group set sail on their ship, the Jolly Roger, ready to find the treasure and make it their own, for sure. As they sailed across the dark and stormy seas, they wondered what other dangers lay ahead, if any. But their hearts were full of hope and bravery, for they knew that with teamwork, they could overcome any. With the wind in their sails and the map in their hands, they sailed on, ready to uncover the treasure on the lands. And so, the adventure began, with the first chapter done. The young adventurers sailed towards the rising sun. Chapter 2, The Stormy Seas. The storm clouds gathered, the wind started to blow. The sea became rough, the waves began to grow. The Jolly Roger was tossed and turned in a storm, as the young adventurers fought to keep it warm. They held on to the ropes, they held on to their hats, as the ship was battered by the winds and the splats. The waves crashed against the ship with a mighty roar, as the young adventurers prayed to reach the shore. But they didn't give up, they held on tight, for they knew that they had to survive the night. They worked together, with strength and with grit, to keep the ship afloat, and to never quit. And finally, after a long and harrowing night, the storm passed and the sun shone bright. The young adventurers looked out to the calm sea, grateful to have survived, and to finally be free. They sailed on, towards the next chapter of their quest, knowing that they had passed their first test. For the stormy seas had taught them a lesson, true, that with courage and teamwork, there's nothing they couldn't do. Chapter 3, The Island of the Mermaids. As they sailed towards the island, so bright and green, the young adventurers wondered what they would glean. They'd heard rumors of mermaids, fierce and true, but they had to find Blackbeard's treasure, and that they'd pursue. They landed on the shore, and looked around. The island was beautiful, but eerie in sound. The rustling of leaves, and the whispers in the air, made the young adventurers look around with a scare. But then, out of nowhere, a mermaid appeared. She was beautiful and friendly, they had nothing to be feared. She told them of the dangers that lay ahead, and warned them to be careful, and not to be misled. For the island was full of traps, and obstacles galore. But the young adventurers were ready to explore. They followed the mermaid's advice, and set off on their way, through the jungle, and over the mountains, each and every day. And finally, after a long and tiring quest, they reached the cave, where the treasure would rest. But little did they know, that there was more to come. For Blackbeard's treasure was guarded by a dangerous outcome. But the young adventurers were brave, and fearless, too, for they knew that with teamwork, they'd see the journey through. And so they pressed on, towards the next chapter of their tale, ready to face the challenges that lay ahead, without fail. Chapter 4, The Cave of the Skulls. The cave was dark and treacherous, full of skulls and bones. The young adventurers knew they had to tread with care on these stones. They lit their torches, and took a deep breath, for they knew that the treasure was close, they could feel it in their chest. They walked deeper into the cave, step by step, hoping that the traps wouldn't make them their next prep. They saw the bones of pirates who had come before, and hoped that they wouldn't end up like them, and forever be no more. The path was full of twists and turns, they couldn't see what was ahead. But they had to keep on going, no matter what was said. They climbed over rocks, and crawled through tight spaces, hoping that the treasure would soon be in their graces. And then they saw it, the chest, shining bright. It was guarded by a monster, a fearsome sight. But the young adventurers didn't hesitate. For they knew that the treasure was worth the risk and the fate. They battled the monster, with swords and with might. Until finally, they emerged victorious, into the light. The treasure was theirs, they had succeeded. And they knew that this adventure, they would never have conceded. And so they left the cave, with the treasure in their hold. And sailed back to their land, with stories to be told. For they had learned that with bravery and grit, they could overcome any obstacle, and never quit. Chapter 5, The Battle on the High Seas. The Jolly Roger sailed, with the treasure in tow. The young adventurers thought they were out of woe. But then, out of nowhere, a pirate ship appeared. And the young adventurers knew that danger was near. The pirate ship was huge, and filled with men. They were armed to the teeth, and ready to begin. The young adventurers knew that they had to fight. For the treasure was theirs, and they wouldn't give up without a bite. The battle began, with swords clashing in the air. The young adventurers fought, with courage and with care. They dodged the cannonballs, and climbed the masts, hoping that their ship would outlast. But the battle was fierce, and the young adventurers tired. They knew that they had to keep fighting, and not be expired. And so they rallied, and fought with all their might. Until finally, they emerged victorious, into the night. The pirate ship sailed away, defeated and ashamed. The young adventurers knew that they had won the game. They had protected the treasure, and sailed back to their land, where they were hailed as heroes, and had stories to be fanned. For they had learned that with teamwork and with heart, they could overcome any challenge, and never fall apart. And so the adventure ended, with the treasure in their hand. And the young adventurers sailed on, towards a new land. Chapter 6, The Final Challenge. The final challenge awaited, and the young adventurers knew that this would be the hardest. They had to see it through. They landed on the shore, and looked around with care. For they knew that the final challenge was there. The challenge was simple, and yet so hard. They had to climb the mountain, and reach the highest yard. But the mountain was steep, and covered in snow. The young adventurers knew that it wouldn't be easy, that's for sure. They started to climb, step by step, and inch by inch, hoping that the mountain wouldn't make them flinch. They slipped and fell, and got up again. For they knew that the treasure was worth the pain. They climbed and climbed, until finally they reached the top, where the treasure was waiting, with a big loud pop. But little did they know, that there was one more thing. They had to pass a test, and that was the final sting. The test was simple, but not so easy. They had to solve a riddle, that was very cheesy. They thought and thought, until finally they knew the answer to the riddle, and they shouted it out, "It's true." And with that, the treasure was theirs. They had completed the adventure, with many cheers and flares. For they had learned that with perseverance and with might, they could overcome any challenge, and win the fight. And so the adventure ended, with the young adventurers victorious. They had solved the riddle, and found the treasure that was glorious. And they knew that this adventure would stay with them forever. Chapter 7, The Return Home. The young adventurers returned home, with the treasure in their hand. They sailed into the harbor, with a proud and triumphant stand. The people cheered, and clapped their hands. For they knew that the young adventurers had completed great demands. The young adventurers stepped off the ship, with smiles on their face. They had returned home victorious, from a dangerous place. The people gathered around them, and listened to their tales of the stormy seas, and the mermaids with long, flowing tails. They talked about the cave, with its skulls and bones, and the battle on the high seas, with the pirate ships and groans. They shared their experiences, with excitement and with glee. And the people listened intently, with their eyes wide and free. And then, they showed the treasure, sparkling in the sun. It was the prize of their adventure, and the journey they had begun. The people marveled at its beauty, and gasped with delight. For it was a treasure, that was truly a sight. And with that, the adventure ended, but the memories remained. The young adventurers had learned so much, and their courage had been gained. For they had discovered, that with teamwork and with heart, they could overcome any challenge, and never fall apart. And so, they looked back at their adventure, with fondness in their heart, and knew that they had changed, and grown right from the start. For they had embarked on an adventure, that would never be forgotten. And they knew that they had truly become, young adventurers, unbegotten.
Dear listeners, I would like to take a moment to express my sincere gratitude for your continued support of our Digital Tales for Kids channel. We are thrilled to have the opportunity to share our love of storytelling with you and your little ones. We understand the importance of creating a fun and engaging environment that fosters learning and development for children, and we strive to achieve this with every story we produce. From the creative storytelling to the digital sound effects, we put a great deal of effort into making each tale come to life in a unique and exciting way. As we continue to create new stories and content, we encourage you to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date on all of our latest offerings. We are excited to take you and your children on new adventures, introduce you to new characters, and help foster a lifelong love of storytelling. Thank you for being a part of our Digital Tales for Kids community. We appreciate your support, and we look forward to sharing many more stories with you in the future.